hello, welcome to a special reader interaction
Spontaneous stream.
video thing.
Yeah, video thing.
I'm Tim from PC Gamer.
I'm Wes from PC Gamer, and I got to play Mass Effect Andromeda last week.
Why don't you, Wes? You've written today your body weight in words about your experiences. 3 hours you spent with Andromeda, playing it on PC. First time anyone on our team's played it.
Yeah, I played a lot.
Give me the top line. I've obviously read all of it. I'm a big fan of your work, but give me the bullet points.
So the bullet points are the combat system in Andromeda is really overhauled from the original games. Like I would say this is, as I wrote in my preview, this is the first one that really feels like a legitimate action game. Like it doesn't feel like an RPG that BioWare was kind of learning their way through turning into a shooter. It feels like a game where the combat, the abilities, the action is, if not the number one priority, is definitely much, much higher priority than it used to be. And then alongside that, you have a very similar setup to the old games in that you have your crew, you have a spaceship that looks a lot like the Normandy, you're going out and exploring, and you're going to have all the same kind of story stuff in this game. So we want to open up to the audience and let you guys ask me questions about stuff that I didn't write in my preview, because if I'd gotten every single tiny little detail out, it probably would have been 10,000 words.
I'm sure you missed almost nothing, Wes, but I'm going to try and I'm going to read the questions as they come in. I will be your beautiful assistant, and then I'm going to paste them into a Word doc basically, and then ask you them. That's
Cool.
You're seeing behind the magic right there.
Let's do it.
So one of the first questions I saw is a very technical one. Will the PC version have a locked frames per second?
So I'm pretty sure they've officially said that it does not. And I didn't do a ton of messing around with the options in the game, but when I played it, it was running on a 4K monitor at pretty consistent 60 FPS. I think there were probably a few times where it wasn't completely at 60, but also it's pre-release and it was running at 4K and it looked nice. It's not a game that is gonna blow your mind. Like it doesn't feel like The Witcher or something where you're like, okay,
I want The Witcher in space quite badly. This is disappointing to hear.
This is not the new bar, but it looks nice. It's really colorful. The character designs are interesting. They're a little bit more cartoony than they are realistic, but the facial animation's a lot better than it used to be in the old games. So it looks pretty good. And I'm pretty sure that they have said no capped frame rate, so you should be able to run it at 144 hertz or something.
Another question, again, probably like an obvious one a lot of people want to know about, is how were the keyboard and mouse controls versus using a controller? You obviously went keyboard and mouse.
Yeah,
right?
I played it keyboard and mouse for about 90% of the time that I spent with it. So that was my go-to, my preference, and then at the very end I played it a little bit with the controller. I thought it controlled really well with the keyboard and mouse. The game is really responsive compared to the old Mass Effects. The old ones are they're pretty clunky, right? The way you move, they kind of added in like a dodge roll, but it was just very stiff. And this game is much, much faster. So like you tap the space bar to jump and like jet boost, and it feels really good. You have this dodge move that you can activate with like the middle mouse button and kind of jetpack across the ground really quickly.
You talked in your preview about there being additional kind of verticality versus the previous Mass Effects, where it was very much kind of you were on a plane, weren't you? Going from cover to cover. And
The old one games were pretty linear when you would get into combat. This one is definitely more open. And the keyboard and mouse controls felt good. You can rebind keys if you want to. Depends on what your typical control preference is, but as you would expect, you're going to be using WASD and shift and control, Q button, E to activate stuff. Your abilities, so like your biotic throw and your like concussive grenade and stuff like that, are on like the 1 through 3 keys. And the lead designer actually mentioned to me when I interviewed him that on the controller, it feels good to hold down the buttons to activate those abilities for ones that take place over a few seconds. So like cryo beam was one of the abilities I use in the game, and you hold the button down to like shoot a beam of ice out of your hand for a few seconds. And he said, well, if you're using WASD, trying to hold that key down while you're moving could be awkward. So they added an option in the PC version to toggle that press, so you could just press it and it would keep activating without you having to hold it down.
Let's see if we can run a little bit of gameplay. And someone was asking about wanting to understandably wanting to see it running.
So I'll pull up some gameplay of it, and we'll just let this run in the background.
Yeah, talk to me a little bit more about the combat, because someone was asking about like how the combat actually felt. And one of the things I saw in the trailer that came out today, which was a combat trailer, was the ability to create skill and weapon loadouts and assign them as four types of favorite that you could then switch from on the fly. Then your kind of abilities would go into a cooldown.
Yeah, so I can't answer that perfectly because I didn't actually see the favorite system when I was playing. It might have been there and I just didn't get to it because they basically let us loose in this game and I had a few hours to play it and there's a lot to see. But one important thing to know about the weapons and ability system is you can spec into any abilities when you level up whenever you want. There's no class system anymore. So you can spec into biotic powers, you can spec into, straight up like combat skills, you can spec into tech skills, and then you can equip those whenever you want from the menu. So you'll have like 3 of those active at a time, and if you're level 10, and you've put points into a bunch of skills, you can be mostly biotic powers equipped and then go up against some new enemies and be like, oh, I want to pull my assault turret out. Just go into the menu, swap to those skills. So I'm guessing with the favorite system, you can just have a few of those set up and pull them up from a radial menu that you just have in combat, basically, and just switch to them even more quickly than you would if you were going into the menu and kind of individually assigning them.
I'm seeing quite a few people asking about co-op. Can you talk about what they said while you were there about the co-op side of things?
So we only played the single player, the campaign, and I asked them about multiplayer, and they basically said, yes, it exists. But we didn't get to see any multiplayer stuff, didn't get to see anything beyond what you would expect from single-player Mass Effect, the campaign, basically.
I think I read, and I don't want to be misquoted on this because I may be wrong, wouldn't be the first time, that all the story missions would be playable in co-op. But
that's not. I don't know about that. They definitely didn't show that as an option when we were playing the game. So that one you have to look up on your own.
Well, in response to the person who said we won't answer any negatives, what was the thing you liked least about it? Was there anything you kind of came away from feeling still needed work or was underwhelming?
Yeah, so EA obviously like very protective of story spoilers, right? The story from what I played of it, without saying anything too detailed, did not impress me. Like the main story, kind of the setup for the game, and I wouldn't consider what I'm about to say a spoiler because the lead designer said this straight up in an interview to me, and it's out there if you read about it. But you're kind of the villain for the game is the leader of this race called the Ket, who are these kind of bony-looking alien guys. He's called the Archon, and he is hunting you down. And the lead designer told me that the reason he's hunting you down is because you can interact with these pieces of remnant technology that exist in the galaxy, like some ancient alien race has left pieces of ancient alien technology behind, and you're special. You can interact with them, and other people can't.
Never tidying up after themselves. These ancient alien races
exactly
just left shit lying everywhere.
And so that's why he's coming after you, and that's just such a tired trope. Like, name a sci-fi series from the past 20 years that doesn't have some ancient alien technology that you can mysteriously interact with. It's in Halo, it's in so many other things, and like that bummed me out because I don't want to be like the magical space hero. I just want to be the cool space guy or girl who gets to experience interesting stories with the crew and stuff. So I thought that was totally unnecessary. It feels very video gamey to make you the all-important center of the story in that way. That bummed me out. And there were some other kind of things adjacent to that that Andy Kelly actually wrote up in another article we have on the site, which is about the very first contact that you make with the Ket aliens. And this is the very beginning of the game. You run into them, and within 30 seconds, you're killing them. Because they're mean, and so you're like, well, we have no choice. We have to kill them.
It sounds like they had it coming, Wes.
And I just was hoping for a more ambitious sci-fi setup than we're in a new galaxy, let's start killing people. Like, of course, this game's going to have lots of combat in it, but there's a little more nuance, there that they could have.
Yeah,
gotten into.
I think you mentioned in your preview that all the leveling up is done purely in and around combat. So your XP is rewarded for
Yep.
combat, and then you only put that into combat skills. There's no kind of putting XP into like charm to try and improve your dialogue.
Yeah,
options or
it's
anything
not
like that.
it's not an old school 90s CRPG where you have all of these different kind of character attributes to
Yeah.
you, or like a Fallout game where you have perks that affect the way people view you, or just other elements of gameplay. Like every skill is about either the efficiency of your combat, like, oh, you're now 15% faster, or do 15% more damage, or it's some kind of active skill.
Sweet percentage improvements.
Yeah.
One person asked, how does the loot system work? Were you getting gear off of fallen opponents, or is that stuff that you have to buy from merchants?
So that's a good question. I didn't get to see a lot of that, but I got to see sort of how the crafting will work. I think the loot will work somewhat like it did in the original Mass Effect, where you're going to get some kind of rewards from killing enemies, and there's also resource gathering, so you can do some like mining for stuff that I think you'll need.
Thank God. If you couldn't mine for materials, what sort of game
If you're
would
in
it be
space,
2017?
you have to be able to
sure.
mine stuff, right? So you'll be able to mine for some things. Those materials you'll use for upgrades. On your ship, there's an R&D station that has two parts. There's the blueprints part, where either blueprints that you buy or collect, I'm not sure how that will work. You'll have a list of those for new weapons and equipment and stuff that you want to make. And then there's the crafting side to that. And in the crafting side, you will be able to take your shotgun and say, I want to put this module in it that I've made that makes it do more damage, or makes it fire faster, or changes it from a spread shot to like a single explosive shot or something. Yeah. So it feels very Mass Effect 1 to me in that way, but I didn't get to see how extensive that is.
One person was asking, and I'm sorry for not getting your names, but they're moving quite quickly. They asked, the aliens in the game, are they? And then it kind of trailed off. I assume he's referring to the romance options.
Are they sexy? Is that the question?
Banger, but I guess which the answer is, of course, yes. We saw this morning that EA announced some of the talent for the game, and that Natalie Dormer from Game of Thrones is going to be playing an Asari scientist or medical officer on your ship. My question for you is, will that not break the romance meta? Because why would you not be romancing Natalie Dormer?
Maybe it will. I don't know. I don't know if she'll be romanceable. I don't know how extensive the crew romance options are. It seems kind of strange they'd put her in the game if she wasn't. But who knows? Maybe she won't be. What I've seen of the crew is you wake up on the Ark, which is you've been traveling for, I think it's 3,000 years, or maybe it's 300,000 years. I forget off the top of my head, but you've traveled.
It's a while.
You've traveled an extremely long distance. Everybody's getting like woken up out of cryo sleep. You're trying to find the planet that you're gonna colonize, like New Earth, basically. And so the doctor is there when you wake up, and I guess she at some point becomes the ship doctor. You take out like a smaller, Normandy-esque kind of survey adventure ship. So I'm guessing she becomes your doctor on that ship, but I don't know if you're going to be normally, regularly going back to the Hyperion Arc and chatting with people there, or if kind of the only like deeply developed characters are going to be on your own ship.
I'm saying you don't put Natalie Dormer in a game and not have her be romanceable. That would be that'd be crazy.
That's your call.
A couple of people have been asking for a comparison with Dragon Age Inquisition. How you feel like whether some of that game's DNA is in this one, and the sense I had was like they were hoping it wasn't like Dragon Age Inquisition.
So I haven't played Inquisition actually. Have you played Inquisition?
I played it very briefly. Yeah, not much.
So they've talked about this some. They said the game that they looked to for the biggest inspiration was the original Mass Effect, more so than other RPGs out there, including Dragon Age. It's not open world as in the same way that Dragon Age is. I think you'll still have the experience, if you want to, of you can go to a planet and go out into the explorable area and farm for resources, kill random enemies. Like you will have the option
Will you
for that.
find anything interesting? Because in your preview, you talked about you talked about the promise of the original Mass Effect being the chance to set down on a planet, see what was there, and actually the reality of that was some procedural generated landscapes.
Yeah,
with
there was nothing there.
Maybe there'd be a crashed shuttle pod if you were really really lucky.
Yeah, and it'll look like every other.
And it'll
crashed
look like the
shuttle
other
pod.
crashed shuttle pods.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They are designed by hands, these planets now, and they won't say how many there are that have these big explorable spaces. It could be 5, it could be 100. Like, we have no idea.
It's probably closer. It's probably closer to 5.
I think it will feel like a lot of games do, where in this genre of like semi-open world, where once you've played it 20, 30, 50 hours, you're going to start to see the seams of how they made it. You're going to see the repetition, the common elements between them. So you'll probably get tired of going out and mining resources and killing, random outpost enemies. But there will be quests for sure that pop up on these worlds. Like, even just driving around on Kadara, which is the one planet I saw, there were some quests that just like popped up unrelated to the mission I was currently on.
Did you get a sense of what they would kind of involve? I think you mentioned there was the potential for a murder mystery side quest.
Yeah, so that was in the Kadara spaceport, which is like a much denser hub of stuff. Out in the kind of open world, there was one quest that popped up for me that was like I forget what it was called, but it said basically like restoring the heart of the planet or something, and it was going to some like beacon sites and doing something. So they probably won't be super involved, but I hope maybe you'll run into characters out there at some point. I didn't get to see too much of that. But back to the Dragon Age thing, how Dragon Age Inquisition is it? It's not like you're gonna just be out in this massive open world with like a list of go kill 20 of these things and kill 50 of these things as just like a constant running quest list. So I think it'll be much more about going to a planet, going and exploring it for a while, popping off somewhere else, doing some more specific narrative quests. So I don't think it's going to feel...
It sounds quite a lot like Mass Effect.
Yeah, I don't think it's going to feel too much like Inquisition, but you could probably play it that way if you really love just that exploring part and going out and doing everything in those areas.
A couple of people have asked about the PC that you used at the event. What was the performance on it like? Presumably you were playing in 4K. How did it hold up?
Yeah, I didn't know the details of the system. It would probably had like a 1070 or something in it. It ran quite well. In gameplay, I had no performance complaints. Like I said earlier, it probably wasn't 100% perfect 60 FPS at all times, but it ran really well. Didn't have any significant slowdown issues. When they first showed us kind of like the video intro, like the opening cutscene that was not running on the system I played it on, it did kind of have it had some stutter in the opening cutscene. Wasn't running perfectly. So it's a month out from release, and I don't know what that system was, so I don't really know.
Did you poke around in the settings at all? I saw the inevitable question about FOV sliders.
I did not poke around in the graphics settings. I poked around in like the key bindings, those menus, and that was good to see. Like, there were key bindings for mouse and keyboard if you wanted to change stuff up. I did not look in the graphics settings, though. I was in a rush to get through the game.
Another person asked about the difficulty of the combat. How would you describe it on a scale from cakewalk to brutal?
It's a good question, and I just pulled up some gameplay if people want to see some action happening, and this like goes through the skill trees as well. How difficult's the combat? I think in this game, as far as I understand it, you can somewhat affect how hard it will be for yourself by choosing where you go and when you go places, because the game is not, I'm pretty sure, is not leveling with you the way like some of Bethesda's RPGs do, for example. So there will be creatures on planets and enemies in certain places that could be pretty tough. So I think you can kind of guide that for yourself. The opening tutorial level that I was playing was not particularly hard, but like enemies would knock my shields down and I would kind of run and get into cover. I think there are probably still difficulty options for how much damage you want to take and stuff. In terms of difficulty coming from how like intelligent the AI is or sophisticated. Don't expect too much. They're kind of fodder enemies, as I think they are in most of the Mass Effects. They'll take cover, they'll shoot at you, they'll move around some, but I don't think you're gonna at some point be like, oh, that guy was really smart. He flanked me and used such and such abilities.
Yeah, this footage you're hopefully seeing here shows some of what I was talking about earlier, which is people the rider character switching between different loadouts. I think in the video he says he starts off with a kind of a sniper loadout, throws some grenades down, then switches to like a shotgun biotic version, and each time they do that, his skills go on cooldown. But it shows that you can have multiple kind of builds you switch between on the fly, so that sounds kind of cool.
Yeah, and like I can't remember if Mass Effect 3 worked this way, but you can have a few guns equipped at a time, and depending on how you spec your character, if you spec into like the combat tree, there are perks somewhere in there that will basically let you carry more weapons. So if you're going super biotic, you're probably only going to have like 2 guns on you. But if you're going like, I'm going to be a soldier, I'm going to use the soldier profile, which gives you extra perks, I'm going to put lots of skill points into it, you're probably going to be carrying around like 4 guns at a time.
One person asked, Jason Shepardson in fact asked, do headshots explode like the first Mass Effect?
Do headshots explode? I believe so. So the whole game is built around combos, the combo system for doing damage. So you can, with some abilities, set up a combo by hitting somebody with like pull, for example, that biotic kind of like pulls them up into the air. Or you can hit them with... And so then you can hit them with an ability that detonates it. So it's either a setup or a detonator. So you can pull them, detonate the ability, and that does like a bonus damage basically. And I'm pretty sure I remember seeing in a description of one of the skills that it did extra damage on headshots. So I'm pretty sure that's still a thing. I don't think they have really simplified anything from Mass Effect 3. If anything, it feels more complicated. So I would expect a lot of what you could do in Mass Effect 3 to be possible in this game as well.
A couple of people have asked about the morality system. Obviously, Paragon and Renegade have gone away.
It's a big deal, yeah.
Yeah. So what did you make of the new way conversations were handled, and did you feel like that the rider character was going to have like more options in terms of like creating a personality through those sorts of decisions?
Good question. I pulled up this other gameplay trailer again if anybody wants to watch it. But yeah, morality, I didn't get to see much of it because that stuff takes a while to play out, and I didn't talk to too many characters. I was doing a lot of combat, doing a lot of exploration, but I got to talk to a few people, and I didn't get to play enough of it to have a real strong sense for how I like the new tone system, which is you can be very professional, or you can be more of a jokester, or you can be more scientific. They kind of just seemed like dialogue options.
I mean, is it purely, did you get the sense that that sort of stuff, because with Paragon and Renegade before, if you built up enough kind of in Paragon, you could then, or Renegade, you could then trigger, certain other options, whereas it sounds like this is...
So that's completely gone.
Yeah, so this is just role-playing. This is just, if you want to be...
Absolutely, yeah.
The Japester rider, you can be.
It's just role-playing. So I didn't get to see this too much, but I talked to the lead designer, Ian Fraser, about this, and he said, we deliberately removed... the stuff you just mentioned, the Paragon and Renegade systems that would affect how you could interact with people in dialogue. So there will never be a point where you have to kill Rex because you don't have enough Paragon or Renegade points to persuade him to your side. That system's totally gone. So it really is more about just how do you want to shape your character. And there are systems in the game to kind of track what kind of personality you're building. But according to the lead designer, that stuff it will affect how characters interact with you, but it won't lock stuff off. So in other words, there's not like a character that if you want to romance them, you can't tell any jokes, or you have to tell lots of jokes. Like there's no one who's going to go, oh, you're not funny enough? Sorry, not interested in you. So I think it's really more about just subtly influencing the conversations you have more than it is like really affecting dramatic story beats.
One person asks, were you able to customize your ship at all?
I didn't get to see that from what I played, so I'm not sure.
Another question then. Down on the planets, you mentioned in the preview that you bump into some different kinds of aliens that are kind of like, wandering around, roaming, natural wildlife type
Yes.
aliens. Describe a few of them.
So on the planet Kadara, when I went to, you first kind of land at the spaceport, and it feels like a very kind of Star Wars-y spaceport with just lots of people milling around. And those aliens are all people you've seen before. The Asari, Turians, Krogans, those races. So I didn't see any new races that I could just like have a chat with. Except one of your squad mates is a new race, and I don't know really much about him yet. On the planet itself, you were kind of running into, I think they were all either Ket or existing races, and just like kind of random thugs, random rogues out there that just want to steal stuff from you or something. But then there's some like animals that just, they kind of look like what you would expect sci-fi animals to look like, just like a big bony dog or whatever. I think that's basically what Andy described one as.
Who doesn't love a big bony dog?
Yeah, so you'll see stuff like that. I think there are robot enemies in the game as well, though I haven't run into them. So here's one that's kind of just like a giant beast guy. And yeah, there's a weird dog thing. I don't know.
Did you get the sense that you would kind of go and farm them for resources, or are they just kind of a natural hazard when you're doing other stuff?
I'm not sure what you get from fighting them. I'm guessing there will be some kind of resources from them. Maybe just experience points, though. I'm not sure. They'll get up in your business. They'll fight you, but from what I saw, there were no like
a 1v1 URL.
There were no peaceful animals just hanging around. Like there wasn't a lot of flora and fauna.
Perhaps on a different planet.
Quite possibly, yeah.
Jarmo Niskala asks, how attached does it feel to the existing Mass Effect universe and lore now that we've moved on from the Commander Shepard era and into these more generic characters without Paragon and Renegade as well? I don't know if the character... Is that harsh to say they're more generic?
So
they may not be.
The first part of the question, how attached does it feel? The arc that the humans leave on is actually like sent out around around Mass Effect 2 time period. So it actually you leave before the events of Mass Effect 3. I don't think that's really significant. That's just like some little bit of lore. It feels very Mass Effect in that the humans aren't the only ones who sent an arc here. Like almost all the races you would expect also sent arcs. So there are Solarians in this new sector. There are Asari. There are Krogans. So you're gonna see those races. So in that way, even though you're in a new galaxy, it still feels a lot like old Mass Effect in that way. Like it's not like an entirely new 8 species to run into. So if you find that disappointing, that's kind of the way it is. You're going to see some new aliens, but it's definitely not a whole blank slate in that regard. I don't know if the characters are any more generic than the characters were in the first Mass Effect when you ran into them. The difference is you played those games for 5 years and got to know those characters. Yeah. I didn't get to spend enough time with them to know if they're
Give the new guys and girls a chance. That's what you're saying.
Yeah.
Someone asked, will there be any space battles?
Like with your ship?
I guess so, yeah.
I don't think controllable, but that would be a surprise to me if that exists. I'm guessing there will be some space battles and cutscenes, but probably not you piloting your ship and shooting stuff. Yeah.
I've got another question about the Omni tool, the new Omni tool. How did that feel? Did you use that?
So there are a couple aspects to that. There's a new scanner system that you'll use. This is another game system you'll use to collect research. So if you played The Witcher, it's kind of like Witcher Vision or like Batman Vision. You'll basically hold a button down to pull up your scanner and use that to, in one example, they show you tracking footprints with it. In a moment early on in the game, in the kind of tutorial-y section, there's a piece of machinery that is threatening to blow up, and they're like, oh, Ryder, you need to use your scanner to find the fault in it. and it's basically just teaching you how to use the scanner. And so you scan this piece of machinery, and you're like, oh, there's the crack, and then they fix it. But you'll be collecting 3 different types of research in the game that I think you use to influence like crafting stuff, fill out the codex, that kind of thing. And then there's the combat side of the Omni tool, right? You can use it as a weapon. And this game actually has melee weapons that I did not get to try. I just had the basic Omni tool. But you can have like hammers and swords and stuff like that.
What was your favourite of the kind of ballistic weapons? I'm a gun guy. I want to know what should I be looking to try and get hold of first?
So the guns don't feel amazing. They still feel kind of like Mass Effect 3 guns, I guess, and that they feel a little lighter when you're shooting. You're not like, oh, like that has crazy kick, feedback to it. I liked the pistol, and I augmented my shotgun and
the pistol's never the best weapon.
I augmented these 2 guns, and I think my augment choices were not great. I made my shotgun auto-firing, so I could hold the fire button down, but it fired fairly slowly, so I was kind of like, oh, that's not quite as impressive as I wanted. And I turned my assault rifle into a laser rifle, but it did really weak damage against the enemies I was fighting. So that was a poor choice in hindsight.
Did the enemies feel bullet spongy or?
Yes and no. They don't react a lot to being hit. They're not like super detailedly animated. But the fun of the combat system to me, which was the case with the old games, but especially with this one, was using like the biotic abilities, the tech abilities, doing those combos. So if you hit an enemy that has a shield with a biotic ability, it does feel very spongy because it doesn't do much damage. But the point is you need to take their shield down before you use a biotic ability on them. So use something to disable them, hit them with a thing that explodes, and that's really fun. That's satisfying. But just pumping bullets into them, at least with the character I had, where there weren't really anything, and nothing was leveled up, was the shooting did not blow my mind.
It's a bit of a grind.
Yeah, I mean, it was fine, but it didn't feel anything special.
I've seen a few questions about system specs. They haven't been recommended system specs haven't been revealed yet, but you can be sure that we'll have them on the site the very second they do, as fast as Andy can type them up. Someone else asked whether there would be support for 21:9 widescreen.
Don't know.
It's always the 21:9 widescreen guys.
I hope so.
Life
Yeah.
Represent. Any other questions, folks? I'll try and squeeze a couple more in before we wrap up. I saw one about side quests and kind of what your favourite of those was, but I guess you didn't play there.
I didn't really get to do any. I did like the tutorial mission, which took about an hour, and I was really like going around searching for stuff, I was interested in it, and I wanted to see everything, and then I realized, I only have X amount of time here. I really need to get to the later parts of the game.
I mean, were you able in 3 hours? Were you able to get a sense of the scale of the game?
Not really enough.
Yeah,
unfortunately. It feels like it's going to be massive, but they're not talking about planets. We'll pull up some gameplay footage here again. Let's see. Let's pull up some combat.
Yeah, let's look at the combat footage.
All right, so some combat's rolling. They wouldn't say how many planets there were that have hubs and how much will be explorable. In terms of the number of things going on in this game, it feels huge.
Yeah.
I mean, the combat system is a lot deeper than it was in the previous games and much more open. So you're going to be able to spend a lot of time going down those different ability trees and getting new skills. It has the crafting stuff. It has mining. It has side quests. It has loyalty missions like Mass Effect 2. It has the main storyline. It has the research, scanning stuff. There's a lot to this game.
I saw one person in the comments saying, like, give up any pretense this is an RPG. This is just an action game now. That's the truth of it. And actually, that was something that kind of came through in a comment you made in the preview yourself, which is that it now feels like the action game it actually always really wanted to be. Like, do you think for people who are coming for the RPG-ness of it, for the ability to tweak and level up their character, there's going to be enough there?
I think it depends what kind of RPG gamer you are. If your favorite Bioware game is like Baldur's Gate 2, you're going to be disappointed by this game if you expect it to feel like that. If you love the RPG aspects of the first Mass Effect games, where you have your loyalty missions, where you're learning all about these characters, where you do side quests on the Citadel and learn about this little bit of lore. When you're doing missions for random people on space stations, that kind of stuff. That's all still going to be in this game. And there's probably going to be more of it in this game than in any of the previous ones, just by the feel of how big it is. There's going to be a lot of those side quests. What I can't answer is the writing in those going to be really compelling? Are the stories going to be as good as you want them to be? I haven't, I played a couple hours of it, and a lot of it was combat, so I just have no idea how good that stuff will be. But if that's what you want, and you want to mostly bypass combat when you're not on like the critical story path, you'll definitely be able to play this game that way. I just don't know how satisfying that'll be at the end of the day.
I'm going to fire some quick fire questions at you now. Let's see if you can answer them. How many companions can you take on a mission?
On a mission, 2.
So the same as before.
Yeah.
What did you make of the interior of the new ship? Did you like it more or less than the Normandy?
I probably would say more. Also, I want to backtrack to that one really quick. In the tutorial mission, you have a couple companions with you, your sidekicks, but your dad is also running around as an AI companion during one part of it. So potentially there will be instances where there are more than 3 of you in combat. But what was the next question?
Did you like the interior of the ship more or less
right.
than the Normandy?
The interior of the ship had a really cool, like, Knights of the Round Table sort of meeting room thing upstairs that I really liked, where at one point when I came back from Kadara, it kind of initiated a cutscene when I reboarded the ship, where all of my crew members, or all the companions, kind of gathered around this table, and then they were just talking about different missions that you could go on. And one guy was, the Krogan was like, "We need to go do this thing, on this planet. This is really important." And somebody else was like,
"You were like, chill out, guy. We've got a lot on."
That's literally what Ryder says. Like, "Oh, it's like these are all good options, but we need to stay focused on the mission." I thought that was a cool touch, and I hope the game does that. Like every time you reboard the ship, basically, is kind of give you a reminder of like, "Oh yeah, these are the story missions you could be going on. Here's what this character thinks is important and stuff." I like that. And it does feel like you can get to stuff very, very quickly on this ship. I think it's a little bit smaller, and some of one of the companions was just like immediately kind of off the main spoke. So you could just like go in a room and he was just chilling in his room. So I liked that it isn't wasting your time too much with running around.
How does the new Mako equivalent handle? I've had a couple of people ask this. Chris George says, "Is it like a frisbee in a windstorm?"
It is definitely better than the Mako. It's not going to drive like a car in Forza or something. Like it doesn't feel like, oh yeah, like super grippy, realistic handling. It still feels pretty like loosey-goosey.
You're not battling Newtonian physics to try and flip it over a dune anymore.
No, it feels fine. There were a couple parts where I kind of just like drove up onto some rocks or like a big hill and got like kind of wedged in there and then had to like back up and go around. I don't know if people are going to love driving around on these planets. That's not going to be like the favorite activity in the game, but I don't think it's going to be a nuisance for the most part.
Jennifer Yan asks, if you pick male, do you still have a sister? And if you pick female, do you still have a brother? Or does the other one not exist in the game? So this is, you pick one of the Ryder siblings to play as at the start.
You're twins, and they do exist. They are in the game, but from what I saw, don't really have much of a role in the story. But again, I only played like the very beginning of the game, and then they jumped me to a save file that was kind of probably like midway through. And at that point, they had no role whatsoever. But Bioware talked about that being a significant character relationship. So I assume at some point you'll be interacting with them in some way.
Hey,
but they are there. Yeah.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Does your dad die? Spoiler warning?
Do
you need to give a spoiler warning?
Not supposed to talk about the fate of your father.
But you know the fate?
I know the fate.
Can you tell me after?
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't want to spoil that for people, but your dad is kind of the introductory character at the beginning of the game, and he is the Pathfinder. So your role in the game is Pathfinder. He is like the leader of the Pathfinder crew. So when you are spending the rest of this game being the Pathfinder, you can draw your own conclusions from that.
Jennifer Yan says he dies confirmed. Dakota Woodruff asks, did you use mouse and keyboard controls? We did answer that earlier. Wes, of course, used mouse and keyboard controls. Another question was, will there be Geth in this? My guess would be not.
No signs of it from what I saw, but I don't know.
Okay. I'm gonna the final question. A few people asked, and it's a toughie. We're gonna wrap up with this. If you had to place Mass Effect now in quality versus the other three
Andromeda?
games, Andromeda, where would you place it?
That's really hard to answer.
Understanding that this is not a review and it's not a fair question to ask Wes. Nonetheless, we're going to ask him it.
I mean, I can explain what I think of the other games, right? Like, I think Mass Effect 3 plays the best out of the trilogy, has some great ending moments.
Two's the best game, though.
Yeah.
Clearly.
Yeah. There's some great moments in 3, but it kind of ties up everything too neatly with the bow for every character. I still think the ending was terrible. There were a lot of people very upset about it, and there were a lot of people who were upset that those people were upset about it. I thought it was a shitty ending. It definitely soured me on that game, but and made me, in hindsight,
in some ways, Mass Effect 3 ending the big bang that gave us Gamergate, but we'll move on from that.
Yeah, it made me appreciate the first one even more because I loved what they were setting out to do for that game. The tone they were trying to establish before they went into the Reaper stuff. So Mass Effect 1 has a special place in my heart, even though I'm sure if I played it today, I would cringe at a lot of the movement for it. It's a very clunky game. 2 is overall my favorite because the gameplay felt better, but it felt good enough, and you had this big crew, and almost all of their stories were fantastic, and that made up for the fact that you killed a giant Terminator baby at the end of it.
The build-up to that mission was great, though, right?
The build-up was amazing, and everything in the suicide mission was incredible.
Except Terminator Baby.
Terminator Baby was pretty dumb.
I don't even really remember Terminator Baby. I've obviously blanked it out. I tell you, I remember the menus for 1 being a disaster. I remember having
On console, they were terrible. The PC version, which came out about 6 months later, a year later, was much better.
How did you find the UI for Andromeda?
This was fine. I didn't do a ton of digging around in it, but the menu for like leveling up your skills and stuff was pretty simple and intuitive, and it had a pretty quick, like I think the tab key pulls up your radial menu to switch weapons. So I think the place where that could get kind of dicey is dealing with like your resources and the mining and stuff, and I didn't get to really do any of that stuff, so I'm not sure how well that holds up.
Cool. Last question then, literally the last question. Who are you going to romance with?
Who am I going to
romance?
romance?
The characters you met, let's assume they're romanceable. Who would you try and romance? And why?
I don't feel like I've gotten to know anyone well
Come
enough
on,
yet.
Fenland.
So there's a new crew member named Jal who is...
Is that the one who looks like a lobster?
Yes. So he's from a new alien race that we haven't seen before.
Okay.
So that intrigues me. But
I bet it does.
We'll see.
On that note, thank you for joining us. Those who did live. If you're not watching live, then thank you for watching anyway. If people like these videos and these streams, we'll do more of them.
Yeah.
If they don't, we won't. Thank you very much.
Bye.